those of you who know me, you know I'm a bit sick on the beat. You know, some would even call me a sick pup. But for those of you who don't, you're going to learn today because I'm going to mention 10 cornerstone horror films. And on top of that, I think we got 15 others that you absolutely must watch this October. And I'm going to go into why you should watch each of the cornerstone movies at the end of this video. But I'm only going to flash them as we're just talking here in the intro, as to not waste the time of any grizzled, sick pups like myself. So stay until the end if you haven't watched some of these that are flashing on the screen. All the remaining films, I will say, are considered classics as well to me, with the first being Day of the Dead. Where Day of the Dead differs, or maybe is similar to Night of the Living Dead, is that they're both groundbreaking films for pushing zombies to a broader audience. But I'm going to say Day of the Dead takes things to 11.
These go to 11.
I had originally debated adding 28 Days Later to this list. And quite honestly, if you are into zombie films, if those creep you out, if they're scary, check that out as well. But I want to say, I mean, you got to give credit to George A. Romero, because Night of the Living Dead really was transcendent for its time. And I feel Day of the Dead is transcendent still for that subgenre, being zombie films. And it also builds upon the lore of zombies and makes more poignant cases for the general themes that are being illustrated in Day of the Dead. On top of that, there are more and better scares, and also better character work and makeup to boot. So again, if you're into zombie films, you're going to want to check out Day of the Dead and 28 Days Later. But, and I think this is most important, if you're not, I do think Day of the Dead is more likely to bring you into the fold. But you can debate that down in the comments down below. So, where to start with this next recommendation? I'm a big fan of director Andrzej Zulawski, because he's got that Polish power, and you got to represent. And while all the films I've seen of him would be solid recommendations, I feel Possession would speak to the broadest audience and would resonate with more than his other two films. It's a psychosexual film that is intense above all else. Also, a general mystery for the most part, which makes it interesting on top of everything else that's going on. The way it looks upon toxic relationships and mutates into a horror film is really genius storytelling that's equally terrifying. Possession has some terrific and memorable performances, and above all else is very unlike any other film I've ever seen. If you're looking for something different, you've found it with Possession. My next pick, Drome, is one of the best body horror pictures out there. The way Cronenberg delivers his criticism or better observations on violent media while pushing the boundaries in so doing so is among the best. Now, I know I'm not the only one here who appreciates some well done practical effects, and guess what? Cronenberg is one of the greatest when it comes to practical effects. It's a mind-bending plot that is perfectly executed and should be making your Halloween shortlist. Time for some foreign horror, this time by way of Cure by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Now, I know some of you don't like foreign films, but I'm a person who watches English films with closed captioning and really enjoys some foreign film. Cutting yourself off from foreign horror or foreign films in general is like only eating quote unquote American cuisine. Sure, you're going to have some good meals, but you're missing out on the orange chickens, the sesame chickens. I mean, the Italians made spaghetti, so.
Let's watch.
You're missing out on all that. I've covered in detail with Matt why Cure is so good, and that was a real in-depth analysis because it is so deep in its messaging. It's a tremendous crime thriller with horror elements, and as all very deep films, it was insanely thought-provoking, which I personally really appreciate. Up next, we have two of Ari Aster's best. No shade to Beau is Afraid, but we're going with Midsommar and Hereditary here. Ari Aster is, in my opinion, in that next gen of horror geniuses. And I mean, I think we're all blessed to have someone like that. Both of these films are able to create scenes that make us, the audience members, have visceral reactions, and it's something I cannot applaud him enough for. If you feel that films aren't scary enough and want to feel something in your viewing experience, Aster is the man, although the feeling he is able to evoke in his storytelling is, in my opinion, a lot different than what it would experience from jump scares. You know, it's more of a gut punch, but I appreciate it. We're following up Aster with It Follows. Now, if you dislike this film, I don't know exactly what to tell you because the premise is really interesting to me and the execution was well done. Now, the swimming pool scene, was it the best? No, but the film has so much more to offer besides that. The way The Thing is able to stir up paranoia, I feel It Follows does for a new generation, and that is high praise, ladies and gents. We're highlighting another director again, and that is Jordan Peele with Get Out and Nope. Sorry us for the exclusion, but these are my top two films of his three so far, and the sentiment towards Ari Aster being that next generation of horror masterminds, throw Jordan Peele in there as well. So, Get Out is able to illustrate the feeling of powerlessness in such a way that it really struck a chord with me. Nope, a film I feel does not get the respect it deserves, is such a fresh take on a subgenre that, in my opinion, is really hard to nail. I feel like Peele has that muscle of adding like actual effective twists, and he always is able to use that to the maximum effect. These two movies being tremendous examples of that. I've compared him a little bit to the likes of M. Night Shyamalan, and I know I'm nailing that pronunciation, so if you would drop a like for that alone, I would appreciate it. But he's more consistent so far. I mean, he's 3 for 3 in my opinion, and you know, let's argue it down in the comments below if you disagree. But all of his twists have been effective, whereas M. Night Shyamalan, it can sometimes fall a little bit flat. Now we're moving on to a film that was able to impress me equally as much for being a debut as what I experienced when I saw Get Out. And the film I'm talking about is Talk to Me. This film has an interesting and fresh premise that is emboldened by the great horror macabre visuals. It's such a creative and genius idea, really, that I'm surprised no one came up with it first, and a great answer to fans who are sick of the same old formula as I can be, or find myself feeling sometimes. And if you haven't noticed by now, pretty much all the films I'm recommending buck the trend of what frequently comes out. My next recommendation, Climax, being no exception. You wouldn't expect a movie full of music and dancing to be horrific, but Climax finds a way. If you've seen Irreversible or hell even heard the plot of that film, you know Climax's director Gaspard Noé is able to scar his audiences like no one else. Kind of throw Noé in that Ari Aster territory and maybe even a notch above Ari Aster. Climax is full of scenes that distress audiences throughout the film and has an ending that I really liked, so check it out. We're going back to pre-2000s for this next one, and it is Audition by Takashi Miike, another fire foreign film. And we know that women can be scary, right? We've all seen Carrie, and it is just an additional element of what makes this film great. And I'm talking about Audition, that is. It's a film that disturbs, so beware of that, but it does so with a purpose. It also explores trauma and the toll it can take on one's psyche, which leads to an overall tremendous film. Mad God is up next, and this is for true horror junkies. The macabre imagery allows us super fans of the genre to feel like we are kids in a candy store. Honestly, the stop motion and claymation allows for world building and bidding and character design that would be damn near impossible to create any other way and look so visually interesting. Because yes, with CGI, maybe it would be possible, but would it just be such a feast for the eyes? I don't think so. We go back to foreign horror with Pulse, with Kiyoshi Kurosawa making his second stop on the list. Look, the themes in the plot are again super deep. It's a ghost story that explores so many avenues that it feels like Kiyoshi Kurosawa was able to communicate kind of his manifesto or, you know, entire thought process on the genre with this film. And it's truly unique. The whole film is really worthwhile, but the sales pitch for this film is that it has one of the creepiest scenes I've ever witnessed. So I've seen over 300 horror films.
Do you know anything about film? I know everything about film. I've seen over 240 of them.
Subtle flex. And I've come across a lot in those films. You know, I've seen some of the best, and I've seen some of what people consider to be scary, but nothing gave me that tingle down my spine as a full-grown man the way that scene has. It almost like, and that's why I recommend this film, because it almost brought me back to like when I was a younger man, like a teen or even a kid watching horror films, and like you get really, really creeped out by a scene. And I think we all know, if you're watching this, maybe you've seen a lot of horror films as well. That is rare air nowadays. But this film recaptured that, and you should really try to recapture that feeling by watching this movie. Last but not least of our non-cornerstone films is Funny Games. Now, I've watched the foreign version, but by all means, watch the English version because it's the same director, the same script, just different actors. But I feel like anything applicable to the foreign version that I'm going to be talking about is applicable to the American version. So the sadism and sinister nature of the villains in this film is truly something to behold. Michelle Haneke, the director of both versions, makes a point of trying to suffer the audience along with the victims. But that doesn't mean, oh man, this is brutal to... It's hard to find the words. It is... You're still gonna like the movie, because I wouldn't recommend it if it's not something that's a masterpiece or really, really good, right? But you sympathize so much with the main characters that it is a brutal watch, and you are definitely on the edge of your seat. You're anxious and you feel powerless. So it's almost an immersive experience when it comes to that. And he did it really, really well. So not only is he able to make us uncomfortable, but he too also makes commentary on the current state of media, a la Cronenberg. And I think he really lets his voice show through without maybe beating us over the head with it. And, you know, Haneke has one of the most distinct voices in cinema. So watch it not only for the greatness of Haneke, but also because this film especially is a horror masterpiece. So now it's time to get to the 10 cornerstones of horror for those of you who have yet to see them or just want to kind of reminisce on the films that you really like. We're going to start with The Exorcist, which gets a bad rap from newer horror fans for the title that was bestowed upon it as the scariest movie ever. And it, you know, it's not full of jump scares. You know, I think there's one or two, but it's not fraught throughout the entire film. And I think a lot of people would maybe expect that from something that is the scariest. And I'm not discounting that methodology that jump scares do make films maybe scarier. But if you look at this film as truly the greatest to present the good versus evil storyline in horror, then I think you will begin to understand what this actually is and appreciate it without being misguided. Will it give you nightmares? I think that depends on what scares you. So for me, on a philosophical level, the premise of true evil existing and being capable of infecting our youth is more existential and terrifying than not. I personally think the themes of good versus evil and science versus religion to be really interesting when handled well, and this is the film that handles them the best. Next, we have The Shining, which ironically may have less of an uphill battle on selling than The Exorcist, which is kind of the consensus number one amongst most horror fans. But to say The Shining director Stanley Kubrick and horror author from whom the story is based, Stephen King, are not legends at their craft is laughably false. This film has perhaps the greatest horror movie performance by way of Jack Nicholson and is a story so rich that it begs for deeper understanding. Next up is John Carpenter's The Thing. Not only do we get a great performance by Kurt Russell, next level practical effects, but to top it all off, this is the paranoia horror film if there ever was one. Get to the defibrillator scene and tell me this movie isn't for you. We have Carpenter again with Halloween. Save this for the day of. It's a film that almost feels disrespectful to call a slasher, as it is so transcendent of many of the films in that subgenre. Michael Myers is the prototypical silent killer from this film, to be quite honest. And if you do like the slasher subgenre, this is the creme de la creme, the American OG, and still the best to do it. This is another film coming up next, this next recommendation, that is or can be considered to be a slasher, though it's a bit of a hybrid in my mind, and that's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is another movie that I talked in detail with Matt about, and damn did I have fun doing so. It's a reaction to that Vietnam time period, which has been fresh in the minds of Americans because of its portrayal in the media, and a sign of evolution from the monster movies of our past. So it's slasher monster in my mind because it's a film that shows that humans can become monstrosities and does so brilliantly, and become monstrosities without any supernatural elements, without any science fiction elements, just through nature and nurture. We're going to lump our next two together, those being Evil Dead 1 and 2. These are my favorite of the series, and rightfully so. It's bombastic, never stopping, incredibly bold, and stylized. I love all the practical effects, the makeup, the camera work, and the editing. It's a non-stop thrill ride that I think would grab any horror fan and never let them go. We're going to another horror icon, Wes Craven, with this one, his first entry being Scream. This is really the most notable of films that are super meta, subvert expectation, and buck all the trends. Again, it's meta in its analysis and super fresh for its time. And while you may think, it's fresh back then, but it's probably dated now, well, I assure you it stands the test of time. Really like something like this that kind of identifies the tropes and tries to use that to its advantage. Next, we have Alien by Ridley Scott. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. In the 50s and 60s, there were horror films where aliens were there, and it's kind of neat and novel looking back. Ridley was the first, in my opinion, and to my knowledge, that made the unknown of space truly scary and intimidating. And let's not forget Sigourney Weaver either, who was tremendous as the lead. And last of the cornerstone films, we have A Nightmare on Elm Street by Wes Craven. This is a personal favorite for the big guy on the mic, and one that deserves its place amongst the greats. Craven changed the game when the killer only attacked in our dreams, making nightmares that you could experience after the film even more dreadful. Beyond that, Freddy was different in a number of different ways. Where killers were silent, he was taunting and provoking his victims. Others wore masks, and Freddy had a face that was horrific on its own. Craven changed the game certainly with Scream, but he also did so with this film, in that it joins a rare sect of movies that, if were to be emulated, would only be seen as a ripoff. It's a horror classic and a must-watch this Halloween season. Let me know which horror film you think I should check out and what you thought of the list. Check out my horror movies ranked letterboxed list, where it shows all 300 plus scary movies that I've seen that I will continue to add to this Halloween season in the pinned comment down below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss what spooky concoctions I will be cooking up next. And thank you for watching again. I will catch you on the flippity floop. Bye, y'all.